You didn't vanish. You were pulled out of reach for a reason. That sentence is an anchor. Say it again quietly, and let it sit where your chest tightens. You didn't vanish. You were preserved, not banished, not broken beyond repair, not erased. Preserved, held in a timing that was not accidental, held so that what was fragile could harden, what was tender could root, what was still learning could find its shape away from the heat of the crowd. If you have felt invisible, forgotten, the one who stepped back when life expected you to step forward, this is for you. If you dimmed so you wouldn't be seen, if you learned to tuck away pieces of yourself because the world felt too hungry or too dangerous, listen. This is the moment where a call arrives that isn't a demand, it's an invitation. The Sagittarius moon, in the language of symbols, is acting as a searchlight. It doesn't yank you into a particular fate. It does something quieter and more honest. It remembers what you were protecting and points you toward it. You didn't vanish. You were preserved. You might still carry the memory of that first time you pulled away. How easy it was to believe your retreat meant failure. People around you assumed you gave up. Maybe you assumed it too. In the halogen glare of other lives, silence can look like cowardice. In the heat of pressure, the act of stepping back can be mislabeled as a breakdown. But the truth is more nuanced and kinder. There are moments when the wisest move is to go out of orbit and into safe darkness, so that you can gather force to come back on your own terms. Before we go deeper, small note. If the shelter of withdrawal came after harm, abuse, betrayal, or anything that endangered you, your action was survival, and that survival deserves care, safety, and professional support when needed. You did what you needed to do. A therapist, an advocate, a trusted helper can walk with you as you re-emerge. This conversation is meant to be companionable, not a replacement for those resources. If this resonates, tap like or save this for later. Come back when the pull grows louder. Share this with someone who has hidden for good reason. What did hiding do for you? What it did, most often, was keep a light from burning out. In the quiet, you learned to listen. You pruned habits, relationships, obligations that weren't feeding you. You sharpened boundaries not because you wanted to be difficult, but because you needed protection. You learned a different pace. Insulation works like that. It preserves what is heat-sensitive. Silence was not the ending of your story. Silence became the greenhouse where roots could thicken. You collected nuance. You practiced saying no inside your head. You tried on steadier rhythms of sleep and thought. There is a form of maturation that cannot happen under constant scrutiny. Some seeds need a period beneath the soil before they can sprout straight and strong. Think of that time of withdrawal as incubation. Incubation does not imply passivity. It often means repair, study, the quiet rehearsal of a life you were not yet safe enough to fully live. You honed intuition. You learned to identify the voices inside you worth trusting. You shelled away the patterns that had kept you reactive, and in that shell, the core of your gift was sheltered. Your gifts did not wither simply because they were out of public view. In many cases, they grew in a different register, less noise, more accuracy. Imagine your energy like a handcrafted instrument that had to be taken off stage for tuning. The instrument didn't stop being useful just because it wasn't played in a stadium. It got repaired, strings replaced, the neck straightened, the wood seasoned. When it returns to the stage, it will be capable of tones that could not have existed before. This is where the Sagittarius moon enters the image. When we speak of this moon, we are speaking in metaphor and in pattern language. Sagittarius is the archer, the wanderer, the philosophical fire that seeks meaning beyond the immediate. The moon in astrology speaks to the interior, the place where feelings, habits, and subconscious rhythms live. Put the two together, and you get an image of a luminous, exploratory force that touches your interior life and says, remember. It doesn't order you into a scripted future. It doesn't guarantee a particular door will open. It functions more like a gentle recall, an awakening nudge that says, the storage where you kept your gifts is being lit now. Will you look? The Sagittarius moon's work is illumination and invitation. It flicks on a searchlight over the parts of you that were preserved. Where before you might have avoided being seen, now a curious warmth asks you to notice what's there. This lunar energy often correlates with increased clarity about values, a restless desire to test the edges of possibility, and a willingness to risk curiosity over caution. Remember, this is symbolic. It describes a psychological atmosphere you may feel, not a guarantee of specific life events. It is an invitation to alignment, not a promise of immediate results. Here is what that could look like in the small domestic moments you know. You wake earlier than you used to, and in that quiet hour, an idea nudges you. Nothing like an epiphany, just a steady whisper about a book you used to love, a class you kept promising to take, a piece of creative work you once shelved, or you find yourself saying no faster than before because staying small no longer feels safe enough for the new self you are forming. Or someone from a past chapter reaches out not to pull you backward, but to recognize that something has changed. These signs are not cosmic guarantees. They are psychological breadcrumbs showing that internal realignment is beginning to show in external life. Let me give you a few small scenes so you can feel this in bones and not merely in ideas. There is Lena, who stepped away from her design business when the constant client demands became corrosive. For 3 years, she nested, sketching, reading, studying art history again, teaching herself a different way of seeing color. When the quiet began to lift, a local gallery noticed the subtle shift in her work. She had stopped imitating trends and started articulating her own voice. The gallery's invitation wasn't a windfall, it was an opening that matched who she had become after the pause. There is Jonah, who used to offer himself as the fixer in his friend group, always the one to mediate and smooth. He retreated to protect his sense of self, and in the solitude, he learned how to hold boundaries without guilt. Months later, he found himself in a conversation with a new colleague who appreciated his clarity. The role that opened was different. It required steadiness, not caretaking. The opportunities that returned were not the same as those he left. They fit the person he'd shaped in silence. There is Mira, who once hid her singing because of scathing comments at school. Years of private practice in the bathroom and long drives led to a voice that surprised even her. It did not take a viral video to matter. A small community gathering asked her to sing, and the reception felt like alignment. The room wasn't applauding the old fear, it was meeting the new readiness. Each of these snapshots points toward a pattern. What returns is not a restoration to the previous status quo. It is the world meeting the person you have become. The Sagittarius moon's nudge asks whether you will accept degrees of visibility that match this upgraded self. It tends to illuminate pathways that are congruent with your internal shift. The projects, the people, the practices that resonate with your newly formed priorities. You might worry, what if I miss it? What if the timing slips and the opportunity goes to someone else? The crux of the difference here is that this call rewards readiness rather than frantic chasing. When you have been sheltered and you step into an opening with a clarified taste and steadier boundaries, you are in a fundamentally different position than before. You do not merely chase the window, you fit through the door that is shaped for you. This isn't to say timing is the only factor. There is action to be taken, but it is wise, measured action, small tests rather than grand gestures, curiosity rather than hustle. So how do you tell whether the stirrings you feel are alignment or pressure you're giving yourself because you fear missing out? One sign: resonance. Alignment will feel like a softening combined with energy. Things open with a sense of permission, not panic. Pressure feels like contraction and a thrumming anxiety that something is about to vanish unless you force it. Another sign: clarity on the next small step. Alignment often offers one obvious low-risk move. A brief message to an old contact, a short practice session, a single conversation. Pressure invents multiple impossible demands. Trust the move that asks only for presence. Here are 3 simple low-risk actions you can try this week to respond to the call without overcommitting your boundaries. First, notice. For 20 minutes, sit with a notebook and simply record the small stirrings. No plan, just a list. Phrases, images, names, small tasks that come up. This is not a to-do list, it is reconnaissance. Second, choose one tiny test. A 5-minute piece of work on an idea you had shelved, a short voice memo to rehearse something you'd like to say, an email to a person you admire that asks one question. No pitch, no expectation. Third, clear one boundary. Tell one person, I can be present for X but not for Y, and mean it. These movements are not grand gestures. They are experiments in readiness. They do not demand immediate success. They offer evidence, either in how you feel afterward or in how the world responds, that alignment is happening. Alongside these micro-actions, there are inner practices that help you discern. Ask yourself, what part of me is seeking approval, and what part is seeking truth? What would it feel like to be visible on my terms? Where, if I allowed myself to be a little more seen, would I still be safe? Write those answers down. Keep them near you. The practice of observing without rushing shifts your nervous system from reaction to curiosity. Curiosity, more than willpower, often opens the doors this lunar call points toward. Now let's speak about the collective. There is a dimension here that feels almost like an echo. You are not the only one hearing this tender summons. Other gifted souls who retreated for care, for safety, or to regroup are also experiencing similar stirrings. This is not mysticism, it's pattern recognition. When cultural conditions shift, economic rhythms, social interest in certain ideas, a collective thirst for gentler leadership, multiple people respond around the same period. Suddenly, what once seemed like a lonely emergence becomes a resonance. You might notice someone in a different city posting a thought that sounds like an answer to something you've been wrestling with. You might meet a person at a small event whose timing, language, and values just fit. These are not accidents so much as emergent patterns. When enough individuals align internally, the external world starts arranging itself around their shared frequency. Think of it like constellations forming. Individual stars that, when looked at together, reveal shapes that weren't visible when each star was considered alone. Your tribe might not be a crowd. It could be a handful of people who recognize honesty and depth. You might find them in unexpected places, an online forum that practices careful listening, a local meetup that prioritizes boundaries, a co-worker who shares a similar cadence of restraint. Keep in mind that these emergent connections are invitations to mutuality, not competition. A tribe formed from preserved people tends to value nuance over spectacle. When you begin to re-enter, there's a rhythm to keep. Allow first, observe the responses. Move in small, meaningful steps that test for resonance rather than proof. This is not the time for maximalist reinvention. The goal is to see what feels true to this upgraded self. That might mean saying yes to fewer things, but with more integrity. It might mean selecting collaborations that honor your boundaries while inviting growth. To help you move gently but purposefully, here are 5 micro-practices you can use over the next month as a kind of field guide to this re-emergence. Each practice is small, doable, and designed to avoid pressure. First practice, the 30-minute reconnection scan. Once a week, set 30 minutes aside to scan inboxes, messages, and notes. Don't commit to anything in that time. Just notice threads that feel alive. Mark one conversation that warrants a short reply. Nothing more than a check-in that honors your energy. Second practice, the one skill test. Choose one skill you cared about before you withdrew. writing, listening, coding, caring, and commit to a 15-minute focused practice session 3 times in a week. The point is not mastery, but evidence. Did the practice still feel like yours? Did it bring you a small joy or a small frustration that needs addressing? Third practice, the boundary ritual. Pick one recurring friction, an old habit of saying yes to draining obligations or tolerating certain behaviors, and experiment with a simple phrase you can use to hold a limit. It can be as direct as, "I can't take that on right now, but I appreciate you thinking of me." Use it once and observe how the other person responds. You are gathering data about your new availability. Fourth practice, the curiosity outreach. Send one short message to someone who is doing work you admire. No pitch, only a brief question about their process or a note of appreciation. The goal is to test how your voice lands now that you've been reshaped by silence. Fifth practice, the resonance journal. Each evening, write 3 sentences about the moments that felt aligned that day and 1 sentence about where you felt pulled or pressured. Over time, you will see a pattern of what truly supports you versus what only looks like opportunity. None of these practices guarantee a particular external outcome. What they do is make readiness visible, measurable, and kind. They reintroduce you to action in a way that preserves your boundaries and honors the incubation you underwent. There will be moments where the call feels loud and you will be tempted to do everything at once. In those moments, breathe into the contrast between urgency and alignment. Ask, is this energy asking me to become something new or to prove I still exist? The Sagittarius moon's nudge is often about expansion in the field of meaning, asking you to widen what you consider possible, not about frantic proliferation. Slow, attuned expansion tends to be more sustainable. As you reappear in increments, notice who shows up for you differently. You will encounter some who loved the old version of you. They may not recognize the person you have become, and that's okay. The people who matter will notice the difference and either welcome it or gracefully make space. A realignment rarely fits every old context. That is part of its clarity. Part of the work of re-emergence is tending to grief for the loss of earlier roles, even while celebrating the upgrades. Your courage is not measured by how quickly you can convince the world to accept your new shape, but by your willingness to stand in it, whether or not everyone joins you. Some of you might wonder whether the tribe you are forming will be enough, whether finding the people who resonate will rely on luck. The practical truth is that resonance often prefers small, intentional approaches. Seek spaces that already hold the values you have reclaimed: honesty, restraint, curiosity, mutual respect. Create invitations that are clear about tone and expectation. For example, if you care about depth over small talk, curate a gathering with a short prompt that encourages meaning. These intentional acts are not manipulative. They are boundary setting for the kind of relational soil you want to grow in. Let me offer a few reflective prompts you can use in a journaling session to help translate your sensations into next steps. They are designed to connect inner shifts to outer acts without coercion. First, list 3 things you did during your withdrawal that you would like to keep as you re-emerge. Second, write down 1 small action you can take this week that would reflect your new boundary. No drama, just a single step. Third, imagine your life 6 months from now if you follow the path of gentle alignment. What does one ordinary day look like? Finally, name 1 person who might be part of your tribe and what a first step toward connection could be. As you practice these, keep returning to the bridge phrase, "You didn't vanish, you were preserved." This is not a comfort blanket to hide behind. It's a compass. It insists that your absence was strategic, that your silence held value, and that timing is an ally rather than a threat. There will be moments of doubt. There will be days when the pull to prove yourself again is nearly irresistible. In those hours, reframe the narrative. Instead of thinking of re-emergence as performance, think of it as disclosure. You are not auditioning for approval. You are disclosing who you have grown into. Disclosure invites reciprocity, not applause. Seek reciprocity. Watch for it. If someone responds with exploitation or old patterns, protect yourself. The readiness the Sagittarius moon calls for is not recklessness. It's discerning courage. Let's close by, circling back to what has probably been the biggest question. Why this timing? Why does it feel like something is calling you now? Timing in this symbolic framework acts less like a clock and more like a tide. Certain collective and personal emotional currents coincide, and when your inner preparation meets an external opening, the energy moves differently. The Sagittarius moon, as a symbolic phrase, marks moments when curiosity, clarity, and the willingness to expand converge. It is a call toward testing what remains true and letting go of what no longer fits. If you have been preserved, the timing matters because it reveals readiness. Not because fate decrees it, but because your internal work and the external conditions are finally resonant enough to support a new chapter. Preservation carried you here. Now patience and purposeful action will lead you into the next room. You will not be the same person who left. The world will not receive you in the same way. That is good news. Alignment prefers you exact and honest to you, loud and compromised. As you step, remember these three small guiding principles. Allow, observe, act. Allow what is stirring. Observe how it responds to small tests. Act in a way that leaves your boundaries intact and your curiosity fed. This is a beginning, not a last chance. Welcome the fact that your life is aligning, rather than fear that it's somehow behind. Your gifts are not outdated. They were preserved until the timing supported a truer expression of them. The Sagittarius moon is calling not to make you into something you aren't, but to remember you into the person you quietly became while the lights were off. If you want to go deeper with this process, subscribe for more guidance on how to translate these stirrings into practices and community. There are spaces forming, gentle communities where preservation and emergence are both honored, and a few are linked below for those who want a practical next step. Whatever you choose, carry this final truth with you. You didn't vanish. You were preserved. Now, slowly, you are being remembered.